This is another game from Taiwan, and it's another game from Taiwan that features a lot of cute cats. And I don't know if it's just a weird year over there for game publishing, or if they really love cats. But I'm really holding out hope next year that it's all beagles all the time. Now, Jungle Rumble is, it's kind of tough to explain. Kind of worker placement. You're using workers to take actions, but you're not actually placing the workers out. But the theme of the game is that you have these kitty tribes. You each take control, I swear, of a kitty tribe. And you're trying to get more workers, is what you do in a typical worker placement game. And you're using them to take the actions of these, like, big boss jungle animals, like a tiger and a raccoon, who have these special abilities. And you try to use them to get your special abilities to build more land, to get more food, to build shops, to get more workers. And when you take an action, everyone else gets to follow you with that action. Think of like Race for the Galaxy, although this is much simpler than Race for the Galaxy. I can't really describe the game too much more. You really have to see it for yourself. So let's take a look at how it's played, and we're going to come back and give you my final opinion. Okay, this is your starting setup for Jungle Rumble. Each player is going to have two of these little kitty helpers, which are just adorable. This is what their tokens look like, and there's actually 4 different ones that you're going to play with, depending on the number of players. You'll only use the stacks for however many players are actually in the game, and they all have a sleeping side as well, which is just precious. You have all these different field tiles, which are all the same, and you'll actually start with 2 of those that you'll lay out in front of you, together with these little irrigation wooden blocks that you'll use to immediately irrigate both of those tiles at the start of the game. You'll also start with 4 food tokens. The first player is going to get an extra food token as compensation, because it kind of sucks to go first at the beginning of the game. You also have these little gold blocks that represent gold. You have these that represent shops, which I'll explain in a moment. And the first player marker, which is equally as adorable as the other things in this game. And finally, you have sort of the crux of the game, which are the jungle animal action tiles. These are all the different characters that live out in the jungle. You have the tiger boss, who, depending on how many workers you send out to him, is going to give you a certain amount of food, 2, 5, 8, 12, 16, or 20, up to 6. For all of these, you can only send up to 6 workers to utilize their actions. You have Monkey Boy, who is going to turn gold into more workers. So you only start off with 2 workers, but you can potentially get more. You have Beaver Man, who is going to let you use your workers in order to get more of the irrigation channels. And then you have the Raccoon Girl, who's going to let you get gold by turning in your workers. For every worker you use, you're going to take a gold or an irrigation channel. Or if I skipped Bull Brother. How could I skip Bull Brother? Bull Brother is going to let you take a field for every worker that you use. Let's see, and then that's it. So then we're going to go straight into turn order. And how the goal of the game is have the most points by the end of the game. The end game is triggered when either someone takes an action that takes up all the rest of the fields, all the rest of the irrigation channels, or you can actually the Monkey Boy action that lets you take more workers. Once you run out of your own workers to take, if you start taking another person's workers, since the extra ones are all in the center of the table, that will immediately trigger the end of the game. No matter which end game trigger condition it is, you're going to finish out that round. So on your turn, first thing you have is the wake up phase. When you use your workers from previous turns, you flip them over to their sleeping side. Now you get to wake up one of your workers. Now for every worker that you were not able to wake up that's still asleep, you can actually use one of your precious food tokens, I can't stress that enough, to wake one of them up. Either that, or if you don't have any other kitties that you need to wake up during your wake up phase, you actually gain food as compensation. Then this is also when you would sell items to shopkeepers, but I'll get back to that in a minute. Then you're going to go into the action phase. On your turn, you're going to choose one of the available jungle action tiles, these characters, and utilize them. You'll grab that token, and then you're going to decide how many workers you're going to use on that action. So for the Tiger Boss, if I use both of the workers I have at the beginning of the game, flip them over to their sleeping side. For 2 of them, I'd get to take 5 food from the bank. But I could choose just to use one if I want to. Now, no matter which action tile I choose, first off, it becomes unavailable to the rest of the players until the start of the next round. But also, each player has a chance to follow me, which means that they are allowed to send one of their workers in clockwise order from the player who took that action, send one of their workers to do the same action. But they can only send one worker. Doesn't matter how many they have available in a wake, they can only send one. They'll flip it over to their other side, and for, let's say, for example, Tiger Boss, they'll get to take a food for sending out their one worker. If they can't do that, if all their workers are asleep, or if they choose not to, they can instead use that action, the follow action, to wake up one of their available workers, or do nothing if all of them are awake and they still don't want to take the action. Once you've got done doing that, then you're going to go into the feeding phase. At the end of everyone's turn, they have to feed all of their workers, even if they're asleep. You have to feed them with 2 food for every worker. Now, you can use the food tokens that you have that you start the game with and that you might acquire from the Tiger Boss, and you can also use your fields. Each irrigated field for every adjacent waterway is going to provide 1 food that you can subtract from the amount of food that you need to feed your workers. It's just temporary food. You don't actually gain food tokens for having that. It's just what you can subtract from your total, then use any food tokens you still need to in order to feed your workers. Now, if you can't do that, you have 2 options. If you can't feed a worker, you need more food, you can basically fire a worker, put them back into the stock on their applicable stack, and take 3 food tokens from the bank. Or, and I don't recommend this, you can take one of the -3 point markers, which is a bad thing. Points can be pretty tight in this game, but if you really need to do it, if you really don't want to get rid of a worker for some reason, you can take one of these tiny little tokens. So once you get done with the feeding phase, then it's going to go on to the next player. And remember that the action that you took is going to be unavailable to the next player, but whatever action they take, now you may have the opportunity to follow. So you may need to plan ahead for that, knowing that you may want to keep one of your workers awake or use the opportunity to wake up one of your used workers. This is how play is going to continue. You're going to either start building out your fields to get and produce more food, or you're going to try to get as many workers as possible as quickly as possible, taking gold from the raccoon action or to use the monkey boy action to make more workers, and so on. Always remembering to keep enough fields or food tokens in order to feed all of your workers, in order to not take negative points. The ultimate goal being to get as many points as possible. And that's where things get a little bit complicated, because there's a lot of different little things that can get you points. First, every worker that you have counts as 3 points each. And actually, I kind of skipped this. I'll go ahead and explain now that when you take a worker, you actually have the opportunity to make him into a shopkeeper instead. So when you acquire a worker from using the Monkey Boy action, trading in gold, you can go ahead and set up that worker that you choose as a shopkeeper by placing one of those little houses on him. Now, you'd ever at most want to have 2 of these, and the reason for that is that during your wake-up phase, you have the opportunity to sell items to these shopkeepers. You can sell either food or gold. When you do that, you're going to place those tokens onto that character, and they are locked in on whatever type of item that you're selling to them. They can only ever be sold food or gold from that point forward. At the end of the game, every one of those units that you sold to them, if they're food units, is going to be worth 2 points each. If they're gold, they're going to be worth 3 points each. So at some point, you may want to build those shops just to get at least a few extra points, because points in this game can be kind of tight. So every worker or shopkeeper that you have is 3 points. All the items that you've sold to them are either 2 or 3 points. Then every waterway and field combination. If a waterway irrigates 1 field, it's worth 1 point. But if it irrigates 2 fields, then it's worth 2 points. Fields that don't have any adjacent waterways don't give you any kind of points. Then if you have unused gold and food, every unit of gold is a point. Every 2 units of food is a point. So each food is essentially half a point. Add up all of your penalty tokens, and then any workers that are not sleeping at the end of the game, add 1 more food unit. Not a point, but essentially a half a point for any of them that you manage to keep awake at the end. So those are a lot of little things that you have to keep track of for scoring, but once you do that, once everyone has, once the end game condition has been met and everyone takes a final turn, you add up all your points. Whoever has the most points is the ultimate kitty wrangler. Thematically speaking, I know that I get mocked incessantly sometimes good-naturedly, by people about the fact that I review all of these games with really cutesy themes and cutesy artwork and anime artwork and tanto cuore. I don't care, because I'm looking for games that have unique themes and are charming and have something different aesthetically from all these other games that I have that have sort of, that may be fantastic games, but have your standard fantasy, science fiction, or like dry historical Euro themes to them. And I think that Jungle Rumble delivers in that regard. It's very childish and it's very cutesy, but it is different. And I'll tell you, I'm not a cat person. I'm a dog person, if you know anything about my channel. But I played this game with two of my friends who are like way off the deep end cat people, and they loved the theme. And I'm not sure they even liked the game itself that much, but that theme really helped them get into it. So you got to give them props for that. And I like the quality of the components, good quality tiles. There's not a lot to it. I showed you the box. It's very, very small. And it's the game comes with little cheat sheets on tiles, which is a good idea, but they're only in Mandarin, which is, it is what it is. I'm glad I even have English rules, but I would love to see an English edition of this, because you really do need cheat sheets, especially for the end game scoring. But everything else is fine. I like the artwork. I like the silliness of the game. I mean, the silly names on the jungle animals that you try to influence and use the actions of, like Beaverman never fails to elicit a chuckle, and Monkey Boy and the Tiger Boss. It's all really cute and charming. Now, despite all this, and you might be, it's definitely more of a family-style game, but I wouldn't necessarily call it just a children's game or a kid's game, because while it's very simple in some ways, it's also a little bit deeper than you would initially suspect, and in fact, there's a couple of finicky bits about it, especially with endgame scoring, that are really hard to keep track of the first time that you play through this. And that's one of the reasons I said that you really need some sort of player aid to keep track of points. It just makes things much, much easier. I like how your workers, so to speak, your kitty helpers, which never fails to make me smile when I say it, your kitty helpers, how you utilize them. The fact that you can go ahead and take an action, and again, it uses a sort of race for the galaxy thing where you take an action and everyone gets to follow up with it in a weaker form. But not just that, you can decide how many workers you're going to send out to manipulate this jungle animal, whatever you do to them to get them to help you, and take their action, and it gets to be better. You get more food, you get more gold, you get workers, all these different things. And it depends on how many workers you send out. This isn't the first type of game to use that concept. But what I haven't seen, though, is the fact that, so when you use them, they go to sleep, they go and they rest. And on the turns following that, where you have the opportunity to follow the other players for their action, you can instead reset your workers and wake them up. Which is good, because when it comes back around to your turn, you only get to wake up a couple of workers, which can be bad, considering that that's less actions that you're going to take if you don't wake them up. And you can spend food to wake them up, but that's less food you have to actually feed them. Which gets into an odd territory where I actually felt like there was some Agricola-ness seeping into this game, because you always need to worry about feeding your kitty helpers. I can't help it. I laugh every time I say that. You have to feed them, and it can be stressful, which is a bit odd for a game with such a charming theme. You really need to worry about that all the time, because taking negative points or having to, trade in your workers for more food, like firing them in order to get more food back, is never a pleasurable action. So it can be a little bit stressful, and the game rewards forward thinking more than you would suspect, because you have to be planning for that. Not just, how much food am I going to be able to get? And you still have to win the game. By just feeding your people, your kitty helpers, you're just staving off negative points or not having more actions in future turns, but you still need to be worrying about, how am I actually going to score points? I need to build more land. I need to irrigate more of them. That can be tricky, how you place your irrigation. Also, how, do I get another worker, a normal worker, a kitty helper, or do I get a shopkeeper? And do I start selling stuff? But again, if I'm selling stuff, I'm selling the precious gold that I need to get more workers, or the precious food that I need to feed my workers. There is a lot of surprisingly difficult decisions to be made here. I don't want to over exaggerate that. or I should just say exaggerate that, because it's not like this is the deepest game ever, and it's not. You'll be up and running with it in 5 minutes, and the end game scoring, as I've said a couple of times already, is kind of weird. There's how things are scored, and things are, food is like half a point, and it's, it can be a little bit finicky, and that's why player aids would help so much. But really, after your first game, you're going to be like, okay, I know this. And then it's just a matter of trying these different strategies, going for the shopkeeper more this time, or going to get as many workers as possible. And who cares if you can't feed them, because now you have tons more actions. And if you really need to, you'll just use the Tiger Boss action and get a ton of food all at once and be flush with food. But the other players have been doing other things. So a lot of really cool things to be had here. It does need an expansion very badly. I want to see more types of character actions. I want to see more things that you can actually do with your workers. And in that regard, I hope that the game is successful and gets picked up by other publishing companies and gets more of those expansions, because if you're waiting for my final thoughts, I will tell you now, I like the game quite a bit. It's so unique. It's so different from the other types of, again, I kind of hesitate to say this is a worker placement game, because aesthetically it doesn't look like that, but that's what it is. Or I guess action selection is, worker action selection is a better way to think of it. But again, that goes to my point. I don't have another game like this. It's unique, it's charming, it can be tough just to figure out what the best thing to do is, and games of it are tight. I'm talking like 1 point difference between the first 3 players. That's the types of games that happen in Jungle Rumble, which is a charming name too. So if you can track down a copy of this, if it ever gets picked up, seek it out, give it a shot. It's a good family-style game with a little bit of bite to it, and I'm not just saying that because there are ferocious kitties involved. I give it a good recommendation.